The billionaire CEO watched in horror as her blind daughter walked straight past a room full of doctors, investors, and security guards, reached for the hand of a janitor, and smiled as if she had finally found the one person in the world she had been searching for. What stunned everyone even more was what happened next. The janitor quietly knelt beside the little girl, placed one hand over hers, and began to cry. Nobody in that polished corporate tower knew that the man pushing a mop through their marble halls had once been a Navy SEAL who had carried wounded soldiers through gunfire, and nobody knew that the billionaire's blind daughter was about to become the reason he finally stopped running from his past. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, leave a meaningful comment, and subscribe to our channel so our family can continue sharing stories that remind us that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones carrying the greatest stories. Vivian Harcourt was the kind of woman whose name could move markets before breakfast. At 39, she was the founder and CEO of Harcourt Meridian, a global technology and logistics company headquartered inside a 48-story glass tower overlooking Chicago's busiest avenues. Business magazines called her brilliant, ruthless, visionary, and unstoppable. She had built her company from a tiny rented office into a corporation worth billions, surviving competitors who had tried to buy her out, undermine her reputation, and convince investors that a woman with no wealthy family behind her could never belong in the highest rooms of American business. Vivian had proved them wrong every time. But there was one battle she could not conquer with intelligence, money, or determination. Her daughter, 11-year-old Elodie Harcourt, had been blind since birth, and despite years of specialists, surgeries, experimental treatments, therapy, and the best medical care money could purchase, Elodie had never seen the face of the woman who loved her most. Vivian had spent 11 years trying to protect Elodie from disappointment. She hired specialists who spoke softly and carried expensive degrees. She employed tutors, therapists, personal assistants, and security professionals. Every corner of their home had been designed to make life easier for Elodie. Braille labels covered drawers. Voice systems announced doors and appliances. Soft flooring replaced hard surfaces. Every possible danger had been removed. Yet somewhere along the way, Vivian had confused protection with love. She controlled nearly every decision Elodie made because she was terrified that one mistake, one careless stranger, or one moment of vulnerability might hurt her daughter. Elodie, however, had begun to feel imprisoned by the very protection that was supposed to make her free. That morning, Vivian brought Elodie to the company headquarters because a major charity foundation was holding an accessibility event inside the building. Vivian planned to introduce Elodie to several executives and demonstrate the company's new voice navigation technology. She believed it would be a perfect opportunity to show investors that Harcourt Meridian was not simply profitable but compassionate. Elodie had other plans. As her mother guided her through the enormous marble lobby, the girl suddenly stopped. She tilted her head slightly, listening to something nobody else seemed to notice. Somewhere nearby, a mop bucket rolled softly across the floor. The man pushing it was named Callum Voss. He was 37, tall, quiet, and almost invisible in the way people become invisible when society has decided they are part of the background. He had been working as a janitor at Harcourt Meridian for 8 months. Employees rarely remembered his name. Some nodded politely when they passed him, while others walked around him without looking up from their phones. Callum never complained. He cleaned fingerprints from elevator doors, wiped coffee from conference tables, repaired broken fixtures, and spent his lunch break sitting alone in a small maintenance room with a paperback book and a thermos of coffee. Nobody knew much about him. His employment file listed a modest history of maintenance jobs, warehouse work, and building services. There was no social media presence worth finding, no photographs from his younger years, and no references that suggested anything unusual. To the executives, he was simply Callum, the quiet janitor. But beneath his plain uniform was a man carrying memories he had spent years trying to bury. When Elodie heard the faint squeak of Callum's shoes approaching, she pulled her hand from her mother's grip and walked toward him. Vivian immediately reached for her, frightened that her daughter might collide with something. But Elodie moved with surprising confidence. She followed the sound until she reached Callum and then stopped directly in front of him. The lobby became strangely quiet as several people watched. Elodie reached forward and touched his sleeve. Callum froze. Then the girl slowly moved her fingers toward his wrist, feeling the faint raised scar beneath the fabric. Her expression changed. She smiled. Vivian felt her stomach tighten. Elodie had always been cautious around strangers. She rarely touched unfamiliar people without permission. Yet with Callum, she seemed completely comfortable. Callum gently lowered himself to one knee so they were closer in height. He did not grab her hand or overwhelm her with questions. He simply allowed her to decide what happened next. Elodie placed her palm against his hand and traced two old scars near his knuckles. Callum's face suddenly changed. His eyes filled with tears, and he looked away as if trying desperately to hide them. Vivian noticed. She noticed the scars. She noticed the way Callum's posture changed when someone approached from behind. She noticed that his eyes constantly scanned exits, corners, reflective surfaces, and unfamiliar movements. She noticed that when a heavy metal cart accidentally tipped nearby, Callum reacted before anyone else, moving instinctively between Elodie and the falling object. He caught the cart with one hand. The entire lobby stared. Callum slowly returned it to the floor and stepped backward. Vivian's instincts immediately turned protective. She asked security to identify him and quietly requested his employment file. Callum tried to walk away, but Elodie held his hand. For the first time in years, Vivian saw fear on her daughter's face. Not fear of Callum. Fear that her mother would take him away. That frightened Vivian more than anything. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Elodie began asking to visit the lobby every morning. She wanted to hear Callum cleaning the floors. She wanted to sit nearby while he repaired things. She began recognizing the sound of his footsteps before he entered the room. Callum never treated her like a fragile child. He asked permission before helping her. He encouraged her to navigate spaces independently. When she made mistakes, he did not rush to fix them. He simply stayed close enough to make sure she was safe. Vivian watched all of this with growing confusion. One afternoon, she found Elodie learning how to navigate a small obstacle course Callum had created from empty boxes and office chairs. He had placed different textures beneath her feet so she could recognize where she was. Elodie laughed when she successfully reached the other side. Vivian almost cried. She had paid therapists enormous amounts of money to teach Elodie independence, yet this quiet janitor had understood something the experts had missed. Elodie did not need another person constantly telling her what she could not do. She needed someone who believed she could try. But Vivian still wanted answers. She asked her head of security to investigate Callum's background. The report came back 2 days later, and the first page contained almost nothing. Then came a sealed military record. Callum Voss had served as a Navy SEAL. He had completed multiple overseas deployments and earned several commendations. During a rescue operation years earlier, his unit had been ambushed. Callum had carried 3 wounded teammates to safety while under heavy fire. The 4th man, his closest friend, had not survived. After returning home, Callum struggled with guilt. He blamed himself for surviving. He refused promotions, avoided military ceremonies, disappeared from old friends, and eventually left the service. He had spent years moving from city to city, taking ordinary jobs where nobody asked questions. Vivian felt ashamed when she read the report. She had spent weeks wondering why a janitor reacted like a trained soldier, yet she had never stopped to wonder what pain had forced him to become invisible. But there was another detail. Callum had received a prestigious military honor for saving his teammates, but he had refused to attend the ceremony. Instead, he had asked the military to send the medal to the family of the man who died. Vivian finally understood why Elodie trusted him. Callum did not see her blindness as something broken. He saw her as someone capable of surviving difficult things. Still, the greatest conflict came when Vivian discovered that Callum had been quietly teaching Elodie basic emergency navigation techniques. She became furious, accusing him of frightening her daughter and crossing boundaries. Callum did not defend himself. He simply accepted Vivian's anger. He told her through his calm explanation that he had not taught Elodie how to fight or how to become fearless. He had taught her how to remain calm when fear arrived. Those words stayed with Vivian. Because deep down, she knew he was right. Vivian had spent 11 years trying to make the world safe enough for Elodie that she would never have to experience fear. Callum had spent years learning that fear could not always be removed. Sometimes a person simply had to learn how to keep moving while carrying it. A few days later, the accessibility event finally arrived. The building was crowded with executives, investors, journalists, technology developers, and charity representatives. Vivian had prepared a carefully designed presentation. Elodie was supposed to demonstrate the company's new navigation system. But just before the presentation began, a technical failure caused several automated systems to shut down. Elevators stopped. Electronic doors locked. The building's emergency systems began flashing warnings. Employees panicked. Elodie was separated from Vivian in the crowd. Vivian's heart nearly stopped. She searched desperately through the crowded corridor, calling for her daughter. Security teams began moving through the building, but the confusion made everything worse. Then Callum appeared. He moved through the chaos with extraordinary calm. He remembered the building's layout. He knew which emergency routes remained accessible. He understood how frightened people behaved in crowded spaces. Most importantly, he remembered what Elodie had told him weeks earlier about the sounds she used to navigate. He found her in a service corridor. She was frightened, but she was not helpless. Callum crouched beside her and guided her breathing until she became calm. Then he helped her follow the wall and count the door frames. Step by step, they moved toward the emergency exit. When Vivian finally found them, she dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around her daughter. For several seconds, she could not speak. Then she looked at Callum. The billionaire CEO who had commanded thousands of employees stood there with tears running down her face, finally realizing that the man she had once considered a stranger had protected her daughter without expecting money, recognition, or gratitude. But Callum was already walking away. Vivian stopped him. For the first time, she did not speak to him as her employee. She thanked him as a mother. Callum lowered his eyes and admitted that Elodie had saved him too. He explained that before meeting her, he believed his life had ended with the people he had lost overseas. He had spent years thinking that survival was something he needed to apologize for. Elodie had changed that because she never treated his scars like evidence of weakness. She simply touched them and accepted them as part of his story. Vivian finally understood the lesson her daughter had been trying to teach her. Love was not about building walls high enough to keep pain outside. Love was about teaching someone that even when pain entered, they would not have to face it alone. Months passed, and Vivian changed in ways her employees noticed immediately. She stopped micromanaging every detail of Elodie's life. She began allowing her daughter to travel independently with proper support. She listened more than she instructed. She started a foundation dedicated to accessibility and independence for blind children, and Callum became one of its advisors. But she also changed the way she treated the people around her. She learned the names of cleaners, security guards, receptionists, drivers, and cafeteria workers. She realized that every person inside her skyscraper carried a story she knew nothing about. Callum eventually left his janitor job, not because he was ashamed of it, but because Vivian offered him a position helping design the foundation's safety and accessibility programs. He accepted only after insisting that the program include people with disabilities in every major decision. Elodie became the heart of the foundation. She never saw Callum's face. But she knew his footsteps. She knew the warmth of his hand.